Welcome to Betrayal Trauma Recovery, BTR.org. I'm Anne. We've opened up some new group session times that work for Australians and also for women in the UK. Go to btr.org/group to see if the group sessions will work for you. I'm sure you remember what it was like when you were searching for help, maybe for your husband, hoping to find the right program or therapist. That's why I started podcasting, because I supported my husband through 7 years of pornography addiction recovery, and not one therapist during that time told me I was experiencing emotional and psychological abuse and sexual coercion. I didn't want any other woman on the planet to be in the dark. If you're like the majority of my listeners, you're experiencing the type of abuse that's invisible and difficult to wrap your head around. Your husband is lying to you, using porn or having affairs or some other type of emotional and psychological abuse, and you're getting the same bad advice about how to improve communication or your relationship. If you need support from women who totally understand, our coaches can help you sort through this. We'd love to see you in a group session today. If this podcast is helpful to you and you wish you'd found it sooner, one simple anonymous way to help spread the word is to click follow or subscribe on the Betrayal Trauma Recovery podcast. Every 5-star rating helps make this podcast more visible and will help save other women from getting the wrong kind of help, like a couple program that will make this type of abuse worse. Your support means I can continue sharing this life-changing information with women throughout the world for free. Scroll to the bottom of any page on btr.org and click on Support the Podcast. Thank you. I couldn't do this without you. When we're thinking about financial abuse in divorce, it's really important to protect yourself. So financial abuse in divorce is the abuser's way of gaining and maintaining power by controlling access to money and resources. And during divorce, it often includes tactics like withholding financial support, hiding assets, or intentionally complicating legal and financial processes to wreak havoc on the victim's stability. And it doesn't necessarily stop after the divorce. So we want to warn you about some of these things today. So why do narcissists use financial abuse? Because they're motivated by control, and they want to undermine your autonomy and manipulate your decisions and make you dependent on them, or at the very least, create chaos. So here are some of the tactics used to financially abuse during divorce. Number 1, hiding income or assets. Number 2, canceling credit cards, shutting down bank accounts, or withholding financial support. Number 3, overwhelming you with legal delays. And number 4, sabotaging your employment. As far as financial abuse after divorce, here's some things to watch for. Abusers portraying themselves as the victim, manipulating child visitation so that they can withhold child support payments or intentionally disrupt your financial situation, withholding assets that they agreed to pay you in the legal agreement, or financial sabotage, like refusing to pay the debts that they agreed to pay or disputing access to your rightful resources. This type of financial abuse can feel relentless. So to protect yourself from financial abuse, working with a certified divorce coach, many of our coaches at BTR are certified divorce coaches and can help you collect and organize your financial documentation, open up individual accounts. Learning strategy is very, very, very important. And the Living Free workshop has the strategy that you need. So go to btr.org/livingfree to learn more. And also make sure you have expert emotional support, like the emotional support we provide in Betrayal Trauma Recovery group sessions where a coach gives you feedback. I have Brenda on today's episode. She's going to share her expertise as a financial advisor. Welcome, Brenda.
Hello, Anne. It's really good to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on today. Let's talk about finances.
Because everyone is always so excited to talk about finances, right?
One of the things that I want to ask victims is, if you had $1 billion, would you stay married to him? And the answer is usually no. The reason they're so afraid is because they're trapped and they don't know how they're going to take care of their kids, and they don't want to work. They didn't sign up for that. Sometimes they do work, but figuring out how do I support a family by myself is so overwhelming. What are the best ways to try to take financial stuff off the table so women can make decisions based on their safety rather than on finances?
I love your question about if you had $1 billion. I think that's very clarifying. And that gives an indication of, are they really staying in that space or that relationship or marriage because they have hope that things will change? Or is it, in a simplified way, is it solely financial? And then if the answer to the $1 billion question is, no, I would not stay here, I would want out, information is power. So that's where you start gathering information. And oftentimes, an individual who does leave an abusive relationship, they might have the means, they might be protected, they might be okay financially, but they've been kept in the dark perhaps about their financial situation. They might not have any access to the financial records. They might not know what their spouse makes. They might be on an allowance. If you don't have any information about what your families or whatever your family is shaped like, what your financial situation is, it's really hard to know. You're just in a space of fear because it's unknown. So the first thing is to become knowledgeable, if you can, as to what your true financial situation is. Sometimes it can be overt. They could talk to their spouse about needing access, and depending on whom they're dealing with, they might get it. Or if they don't have any access, then it becomes, let's call it a treasure hunt, where you're picking up bits and pieces of the financial picture to try to understand what your options are, what your situation is. The other piece of that, if you're considering leaving, and if leaving means divorce, is to get smart about what the rules are in your area. I've heard it said there are like 3,300 counties in the United States, something like that. Don't quote me on the exact number. And there are just as many different ways to be divorced. So not only do rules vary state by state, rules and rights, they vary municipality to municipality. That at least gives people grounding or information, data, to start figuring out, would they be okay?
In the BTR Living Free workshop, we have a section about finances. And living free is not about getting divorced. It's about seeing reality. In the beginning, when women got to that part, they were like, does she want me to get divorced? And the answer, it's not yes or no. I'm not trying to push anybody any direction, but I do want them to be safe. And financial safety is such a huge part of this puzzle. In Living Free, when people talk about physical abuse, many of the people that listen to this podcast are not necessarily being physically assaulted. They're not being punched. They don't have bruises. They're experiencing emotional and psychological abuse and sexual coercion. And it's difficult to see. And I want people to start to think about the threat of not having a home, the threat of not being able to put food on the table, the threat of not having a roof over your head, the threat of not being able to pay for gas to get around. That is a physical threat.
Sure, it's your basic fundamental human needs.
Exactly. So if they're threatening, if you divorce me, then you'll never be able to take care of yourself, or you thinking that in your mind is a physical threat. It's extremely physical, and I see it as physical abuse. So think, is this threat of physical harm the thing that is keeping me from getting to safety? And being educated about your finances and what you need is one step toward not just financial safety, but also physical safety. Because if you know you can take care of yourself, that is such a relief. Even if I never got any money from him, I could keep a roof over my head. I could pay my bills. I would be able to buy food, that sort of thing.
And it lets people then figure out what other information they need and what decisions they need to make. If baseline is, everyone is different. I could go back to work. In our area, there are programs that help women who are in abusive situations retrain and get to a living wage? Is that available near you? Do you have enough assets that you have every right to that you would be able to take? Every situation is going to be different, but unless you have the information, you can't figure out what your next steps are.
When you said talk to him, that made me nervous because I was like, whoa, 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 you might tip him off and then he might start hiding money and he might start manipulating you. So aside from talking to him, what tips do you have for how they can start to find information out about their finances?
I'm just going to backtrack to talking to him for a minute. Yes, it could. And everyone knows their relationship and situation better than anyone else can. I have had people who will get the information and they do use a ruse. It will be, I needed to sign Susie up for soccer, or I want to go to this workshop with my sister and we're going to learn how to understand taxes. Can I have our tax return? So it might not be overt and they still have access to the information. So that being said, I would say anywhere you can get it. If you're able to get logins, yes, then you can go online. However, there are flags there because if you log into the bank account, that bank account or credit card might register the login. They might be set so that there's an alert. Someone logged into your account at 2:24 this afternoon. So you got to be aware that that's out there too if you are in such a situation where you're cut off from all of that information. So it just as asking someone directly could present danger, know that logging into things could as well.
That is a good point. I hadn't thought of that. I like the ruse idea that, hey, I'm going to be logging into this thing. Could I have the login because I'm doing blah, blah, blah. That is a reason not related to him. Not like, you seem like you're an abuser and I'm considering leaving you. Can I have the login? Like, it's probably the worst idea, I think.
You're exposing yourself. So unfortunately, as you and your listeners all know, you're walking a fine line and they're in a precarious situation. But they also usually know, I know from my own experience, I would often know the things that were going to like tee up an issue, tee up an explosion, tee up anger. Sometimes you don't. And sometimes that's another problem, right? It's out of the blue. Hey, I just put cheese on that sandwich. I didn't think that it was going to cause World War III.
They get very unpredictable when they feel like they don't have control. And so that's why I'm concerned about, like, so many women have told me, oh, he'll never do that. So many of our clients here at BTR, they're like, oh, I'm getting divorced, but I've got it all ready to go. It's going to go well. He's told me he'll always take care of me. And then like 100% of the time, it does not go the way that he manipulated her to think that it's going to go. It always goes sideways.
And the system is built for that. People often going through divorce will be, I'm going to be heard finally. The system will protect me. I trust the system to do its job. It's not going to. We don't even know what the job is half of the time. If you get all the way to trial, the decisions are being made by a judge who might be late for a dentist appointment and they're paying half or no attention to your story and then they're going to rule. You can't really trust the system. You can know the rules. You can try to figure out what's your bottom line? What's your worst case scenario? Where are you protected? Where are you exposed? But circling back to like where you can get the information, you turn yourself into a little sleuth. So your own little private investigator. Do you get the mail when the mail comes in? Do bills come? You can order a credit report and you can do that separately. So at least you know what credit cards exist, how long they've existed. That's another way to sometimes expose hidden debts or hidden money. It's depending on your situation in your household and where the safe conversations are. And a lot of that is, I would say, catering to the abuser.
I would say strategically talking to him rather than catering, but yes.
Yes. So you're figuring out what is the information you're looking for? how can you get it? What is a viable reason for having it? That isn't going to create a situation that's going to make life more difficult for you.
Getting a credit report, that's a really good idea, because then you can see the stuff that he's pulled. Can he have his own separate credit report that she can't see some of the stuff on?
Yes.
Okay. So she wouldn't be able to see like a credit card that he applied for all by himself?
Depending on the information that she has, she might be able to order a credit report for him.
Oh, if she knows his information, she could order it.
And the question to ask then is, what's the bounce back? Is he going to be alerted that there was a credit pool? But you can find that out before you do it rather than be surprised after. So it's just a question to ask.
Yeah. What I have found with victims is that the whole situation is so overwhelming. Trying to make decisions, trying to figure out what to do is so overwhelming that it feels like you've got problem after problem after problem after problem just piled on top of you, and there's no way to get out from under it. Talking about maybe just doing one thing today to try to reduce the overwhelm when it comes to finances. Any ideas there so that it's not so overwhelming?
So are you asking in the case of someone who plans to leave the relationship?
No, here at BTR, we only talk about safety. So just so that you are financially safe, so that you feel financially safe, and also so that you know how much money you would need if he suddenly divorced you, for example. So this physical and financial safety, what I'm talking about is just being educated about your financial situation, how much your house payment is, how much houses cost in your area, how much you could make if you got a job at the library, just basic information. I feel like information leads to emotional and financial and physical safety when it comes to like, how much do I need to have a roof over my head? And I think regardless of what path you take to safety, you need to know this.
You're looking at kind of four major categories: what you have, what you spend, what you owe, what you earn. And anytime you start accumulating that information, it's also future casting, right? You can then picture yourself perhaps in a different situation or a safer situation because you've got a little bit of that information. What you can earn. Like you said, what can you earn working at the library? Were you working and maybe you were a teacher and your credentials are out of date? What would it take to get those back in? So you can be hired. Are schools in the area hiring? Is that something you would want to go back to? So it's all building information. That would be in the what you earn category. What it takes to live. You can get online, or if a newspaper still exists in your area, get a newspaper. What does an apartment cost? Do you need a car? What would that cost? Do you currently have one? Just starting to put the pieces together of what would it take for you to be secure? Food, shelter, clothing. Is that available to you? What are your options there? Every little bit of additional information you can gather is more than you had before. And hopefully both empowering and putting you in a safer place. Just because you are then more informed.
Mm-hmm. You saying that reminds me of this class I had in high school. In high school, we were paired up with a partner. His name was Tony. I remember this really well. And then we drew like little slips of paper for like your job and different things about you. And you pull them out. That was your scenario. I was paired up with Tony because he had a car and I didn't. And we were to go out and find an apartment that we could afford and buy groceries and figure it all out. So we would drive around, and that was so helpful. I was like, whoa. It was at that time that I personally decided I would go to college because I had a job at the time and I knew there's no way I could afford this apartment on the job I currently have that I do after school. And it really helped me put two and two together, I think, just as a teenager. But then I'm thinking about some of the divorce coaching clients that we have at BTR, because many of our coaches are certified divorce coaches. And I remember one of them was talking about one of our clients who she thought, I can never do this. I can never do that. But once they went through all the financial stuff, she realized that all she needed was an extra $1,000 a month. That was it. And then when she figured that out, she thought, oh, I can easily get a job that earns me $1,000 a month and I'd still be able to afford my house. And once she had that information, she was able to move forward on the path that she thought was the most safe for her. Getting this information is so helpful. And especially if you don't know what you want to decide, I think getting the information will help you make that decision.
When their faces light up and they're like, oh, I can do this. I'm going to be okay. And sometimes at first blush, the first pass at looking at what it's going to cost, they might not be okay, but at least then they know what it's going to take. Like maybe we can't be in safety right now, but this is what it will take for me to get there.
You've had personal experience with this. Can you talk about how these issues came into play with your own personal experience?
As I went through years and years and years of my relationship, it became more abusive and more covert. And when I look back now, I can say, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? Who was that person? And there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of baggage in the things that became okay over the years. And I didn't really see it until I was away from it. I knew in my heart that it was not okay to be screamed at in the street because of some small thing, right? And called names and repeatedly verbally abused. But it happened so gradually over time that it was just my normal. It was what I was used to. And it really took starting to step away from the relationship to look back and reframe and see just how bad things had gotten. There were times when my husband would literally ask other women out in front of me and then gaslight me like, oh, no, it didn't really happen that way. You're making a big deal out of it. She's just a business connection or whatever, which it sounds telling now, like, how on earth could you stand there and watch that happen and go home and make dinner and put the kids to bed or whatever our normal was? And I think that it was just normalized. And the only way I got clear on this is not okay was with people, either friends or professionals, who after a while could see and validate. Oftentimes we're told, oh, that's not a big deal. Oh, he had a bad day. Oh, whatever the excuse is, it's still an excuse. And it is not okay to diminish people. It is not okay to swear at people. It is not okay to abuse people. It is not okay to hide information. And then with people who are, again, in this case, let's say professionals, a therapist who, instead of saying, this is how you accommodate him, who say, how do we support you? And I see you. And the behavior is not normal. It's not rational. It's not acceptable. But it takes getting permission sometimes, I think, from others who, instead of saying, suck it up, you can do this, you just have to keep accommodating, say, you are worthy, you are whole, you are valuable, and this is the only life you have. You don't need to live it this way. And once you start getting more voices who are giving you that support, then you can start to see a different reality. You can start to see space where you can have a valuable life, where you can be in control of your own decisions, where you're not always walking on eggshells waiting for the next blow up or bad thing to happen.
Yeah, I think so many women, at least women who come to BTR, they've been to a lot of therapy. They've asked their friends and family for help. And a lot of the time, no one has told them this is abuse.
It's just how you can change, how you can accommodate, how you can change yourself to make it okay. But the answer, I think, is it's not okay. it is abuse, and no one deserves that.
Once I realized it, once women, through whatever way they do it, some women learn it from listening to the podcast. There's a myriad of ways that you can realize, oh, this is abuse. Then when you've got the right pair of glasses to actually see reality for what it is, then you can start making decisions, which I think comes right into the financial piece, because once you know the reality of your financial situation, no matter what that is, then you can start making decisions. I'm thinking of another woman who thought that her husband had a ton of money. And so she thought that in divorce that she would get a lot, so she wasn't super worried about getting a job. She wasn't opposed to getting a job at all. She just didn't think about it. And then when she found out more, she realized that he was in so much debt that it was better for her to not take anything from him and just let him have his debt. And then she was free to go build her life the way that she wanted to and not be saddled with all the debt that he had accrued. And in her situation, that helped her move forward, realizing I'm going to go back to college and I'm going to start a career.
We are then working through their finances and what's feasible, and just call it, what does it cost to live? That's what we're really figuring out. A woman in an abusive relationship, trying to figure out what her options were. And at first blush, she looked at now she had access to their finances, but she looked at what they had and was like, oh, I'm going to have $500,000. I'm set for life. Let's work through this. Let's do the math and figure out what would it take for her to live, for her kids, for their schooling, for all the things. And it came up to about $100,000 a year. So $500,000 after taxes, call it $350,000, that's going to get you through about 3.5 years. So now you have that information. Good, you're going to be okay for 3.5 years. And then what? Or if you don't want to dip into that, what are your options now? For me, every little bit of information you have that adds to the pieces of this puzzle you're putting together for what your life can look like, what is safety to you, what is acceptable to you. The more information you have, the better able to make your own decisions.
In some of these cases, I hear about women hiring like a forensic accountant and professionals like that to help with their divorce cases. Can you talk more about specialized services like a forensic accountant? What does somebody like that do? Things that women might need to consider when they're looking at finances.
So a forensic accountant is going to dig deep into the nitty gritty of the family finances, sometimes looking for misspending, hidden money, things like that. Sometimes involved in putting values to things. So if you're dividing things, you got to know what you're dividing. What is it worth? So a forensic accountant is often going to be really worthwhile when there are big financial questions or money might be hidden somewhere. It's harder and harder to hide money because there's an electronic trail, there's a paper trail, there's tax trails. Like almost every transaction we do, unless you're dealing in cash or trade, has a trail. So it is harder to hide. Now, it's not impossible, but it's harder. But for most people, it's not necessary. If you don't have a complex situation, often hired, often overkill. If there's not a lot of money at stake. So I had a client come to me about a year ago, and she was sure, absolutely sure her husband was hiding money. But when we kept talking about it, the amount that she thought he was hiding, it would have cost her so much more money to find it than the finding it was worth. So you've got to figure out what it's worth. Is it millions at stake? Are there tens of thousands of dollars that have gone missing? Then it's probably worthwhile. If we're talking $1,000 that he might have set aside, you will probably pay much more in professional fees to track that down than you're ever going to get back. As you're approaching all of this and trying to get smarter about what your financial situation is, whether you're aware of everything, some of the really good questions to ask yourself are, at what cost? What's the return on that investment? if you get that information, is it $5 or is it $50,000? How much are you willing to spend to get it? A forensic accountant is expensive. The spouse took out a credit card that his wife wasn't aware of and was spending it on porn and a woman in Eastern Europe that he kept sending money to. So he would draw it off the credit card. And she was incensed and she was very hurt. And they were actually going through the divorce process. And she wanted an accounting of what he had spent. And I completely understand that. And they weren't in a financial situation where they could throw money away freely. But in actuality, what he had spent was about $500. It was a lot, but it would have cost so much more to try to trace that money. It wasn't worth it. So in that case, she knew about it. They could use it in their discussions. She's never going to get that money back. He already spent it. But tracing it wasn't worthwhile. Another woman did go through, it was 10,000 pages of credit card bills that they gave in a hard copy. But we found $250,000 that he had spent on a girlfriend. That was definitely worth it.
Mm-hmm. So depending on what it is. Yeah, I feel the same way about alimony, for example. If the lifetime value of spousal support is $80,000, let's say, like $10,000 for 8 years, and you spend $150,000 getting that, like you really got to think about the numbers here.
Good math.
Yeah. You like do some math and figure that out. On the flip side of this, I have heard of a few victims who are like, I am going to start hiding money. And they have the impression, and this may be true, I am unschooled on this part of it. So they're like, I'm going to start putting money here so they can't find it. So I'm not going to get stuck paying him alimony. Can you talk about that? Is there a way to legally protect yourself from that for women who think that there is a way to hide the money? Can you maybe talk them through this situation?
Maybe, but at what cost? First of all, is there a legal way to hide money? Not really. In that case, if you're going through divorce, you're signing a contract that's on file with the court. And you're essentially saying, whether it's mediation, collaborative process, litigation, whatever you go through, every document I've ever seen says, I told the truth and I disclosed everything. So that's pretty heavy. If you're going to hide money and you're still okay with signing that, and then it's found out later, you're not in a good situation. So again, was it worth it? Is there a legal way? There are tricks that people and groups and whatnot will share as to how you can stash away a little cash. And sometimes it might be necessary. I've seen partners cut their partner off and stop paying the bills out of spite.
That happened to me. I was completely cut off from finances. Yeah.
If you could be at risk, and you say physical safety of not being able to, you don't have food, shelter, and clothing. You're not able to live safely. Can you set aside money? Yes. The hiding it part is where it gets tricky. If the money is money that is marital, you have a right to it. It is not income and I'm here not working, raising the kids, and I don't have anything of my own. Yes, you do. You have just as much right. You're not being paid for your work. But it is not his retirement account. It is marital. There's a caveat to everything. If he had it before you got married, that part's not marital. But anything that was earned or saved during a marriage, unless it's a gift or inheritance, because again, caveat, is marital. You have a right to it. So it's not like you're hiding stealing if you're taking money to make sure you can live.
In my case, I had paid off $100,000 of his school debt right when we got married. That was premarital assets in my case, because I was a teacher for 10 years and I'd saved really well and a bunch of stuff. And I did not get that back because I had apparently commingled it.
Yep.
And then my grandma, when she passed away, she had given me a small sum of money. And you saying that if it's an inheritance, it's yours, mediation, instead of saying it's the law, so I'll give it to her, he said, oh, I know how much she loved her grandma, and I would never want to take that away from her. So as if he was just being so nice to give it back, instead of me realizing in that moment, he was just trying to look good when he had to give it back no matter what.
Well, he had to give it back if it stayed in your name. If you put it in a joint bank account, not the case.
Oh, it wasn't a joint bank account. So maybe he was, quote unquote, being nice.
Yeah.
But he wasn't.
Exactly. He was looking good.
Yeah. For whatever reason he wanted to look good.
I guess this is the difference between a financial advisor who you might have to help you plan your retirement, what have you, and a certified divorce financial analyst, because divorce has its own money rules. They are different. Actually, partnerships, depending on the state you live in, can have their own money rules. Some recognize it, like a common law marriage, even if you're not married. Others don't. And your rights are different depending on where you live.
Yeah, that's good to know. With your financial experience, what would you say to women who are listening who are skeptical about their financial future?
I would say you have value and you have rights, and it is in your best interest to know them. And sometimes you're not going to like what you learn, but you'll have information you need to start seeing a different future or take control over your own situation, even if it's a little tiny thing at a time. If you are not safe and that doesn't feel good in your body, and you've been gaslit or brainwashed to believe that you don't have rights to have the financial information, that everything in the marriage belongs to the abuser, not to you, that you have been told you're just lucky to be there, I would say you're probably not lucky to be there. And the more you surround yourself with support of people who tell you that you have value, that you have worth, as challenging or huge as moving out of that space might seem, even a little step, like a little crack in the situation, can then become bigger and bigger and bigger. And hopefully you find yourself in a space where you are safe, whether it's married or not married, in a relationship, not in a relationship, where you are safe, where you are valued. So often people in an abusive situation are made to feel small and as though you owe something to the abuser. You don't. You are complete and whole and valuable.
Thank you so much for coming on today's episode and sharing your thoughts. I appreciate it. Her website is bridgingdivorcesolutions.com. Brenda, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I so appreciate the work that you do. It's incredibly important.
If this podcast is helpful to you, please help us reach other women by following or subscribing and giving us a 5-star rating. Thank you for helping other women find us. If you've already purchased a copy of my book, Trauma Mama, Husband Drama, please circle back and give it a 5-star rating. A lot of women are searching for books about betrayal trauma on Amazon, and rating Trauma Mama will help them find this podcast, which is free to everyone. Your donations keep this podcast going. Go to our website, btr.org, scroll to the bottom, click on Support the BTR Podcast. And until next week, stay safe out there.